Hey, Fernando.
Hey, Jordan.
Welcome. Today is going to be a very interesting topic, one that's near and dear to my heart. We're going to be exploring psychedelics and the role, the role that they have played in both of our lives. You and I have both, in a way, been shaped through our use of psychedelics, through our own research into the topic, both through reading and through experiencing. So to get started, if you'd just like to express how your journey into psychedelics started and where it's taken you.
Yeah. Thank you, first off. So psychedelics has been a strange journey for me I'll have to start way back when I was a kid. And I feel like some of this stuff will be relevant. Maybe I'm just rambling, but I feel like I had to get through all this to get to like the important parts. So growing up, I grew up in like Barnhart, Missouri. So like, middle of nowhere, and having, we were pretty isolated, and like I didn't have a lot of friends in the neighborhood. It was mostly just hanging out with the family. Even extended family was like everyone was outside, so it was not. We didn't travel a lot to see them. They were like, all over the country in Puerto Rico, Texas, and that sort of thing. And I remember, I think it was around when I was in middle school, I started having these strange recurring dreams where I just remember being like, in the dream, I just knew I was 18. Don't ask me why, I just knew. And there's a white light. Like I couldn't see myself past this age. And it was it was very ominous, and it was a repeating dream. That's the only repeating dream I ever had in my life, but it made no sense. After it started happening a few times, I was feeling nervous about being 18. Like, what's am I going to die when I'm 18? Like, what's going to happen? And so, there was a point where I was feeling, I think I struggled with feeling alive in my life. Like I had some friends, I played video games, but I feel like I didn't have any like passions, and kind of like going through the motions. And I don't know if you ever had the experience of growing up where you're just like, you wonder like what else is there here? You're just having this experience, and you're like, I don't, like nothing felt like it had such significance. And it's a weird feeling to be when you're that young, because you're like, then you don't know whether things are worth trying or not, or exploring or not. There was a point where I did try to kill myself. And I actually, we lived close to a highway, and I remember one day I was dealing with like this heaviness of like existing, and like I was like, I don't know why I even exist. I don't know why I'm even here. I don't know if this is even something I want to continue doing, because it seems like more of the same. And I remember one day I left my house, and I was basically walking my way to the highway, and I was more than halfway. And that was the one day that my mom was driving home, and she off work early that day. Mm-hmm. So she saw me walking. She saw I was like sobbing and crying, and was just like walking towards, the highway. And then she like saw me and then turned around, and she like asked me if everything was okay. And I couldn't say a single word. And I was just crying, and was just like, and I think she started crying too, because I think there was something she picked up on. Like I was not okay. I was just feeling, and I didn't really know how to explain it. I had some bit of distance, my family at that point. So I went through like, my parents put me into like a depression study. And so like I was either taking a placebo or a sugar pill, and I was like 16, 18 months or something. I was doing this, and it was, I didn't find out what I was taking towards the end. But it was also seeing like a psychologist, one of the two, every week or once every month. And I was making, I was no longer feeling this existential dread, if you will. and found out I was taking a sugar pill the entire time. So that was like one step towards like having for at least me, I know that's very different for other people, but from my experience, it was, like there is these like experiences of feeling this dread are not so permanent that I can't like move past them. So that was like, that started kind of this, I think that was certainly one of many catalysts that like moved me in this direction of like, what else is on the other side? And then somewhere probably a year after this, I got caught trying to steal. I gave everything back, so I had nothing, but I ran. And that was I ran. The short story is I basically tried to take some things from Target, didn't go so well, gave it back to like the rent-a-cop and the Target employee. And then while we're walking back to the food court area, I bolted the doors. Yeah. And I had an idea where I had a friend that lived close by. So I knew I'd be like, I'm just going to run to the woods, go down the creek, and then go up to his house and, figure it out from there. Yeah. Didn't go as planned because all the bystanders, there's like at least several cars and people were like going into Target. And while I was running out, the moment I turned my head, I had bumped heads with this girl who was walking in with her mother. And then I help her back up and then I bolt off. And I think people who were walking by saw this and thought I like ran into this woman and this girl and headbutted her and then ran off. So like from their perspective, they thought like, who's this kid? Like, and the reality is like we bumped heads because I wasn't looking where I was going. I helped her up and then I ran off. Just trying to be polite, like when you're on the go, I was like, I'm sorry. Several people saw this and got back in the cars, cornered me in, tackled me to the ground, and then drug me back into Target.
Holy shit.
It was surreal. It was like I have like three adult, like, probably gentlemen in their 40s or 50s who like dragging me in and they're like, say you're sorry to the girl. I'm like, I'm sorry. So then I got upgraded where I got to deal with a real cop instead of the rent-a-cop. So then I got taken to juvie for, I think it's like 5 or 6 nights. So at that time I was going to I think I was going through like a Catholic high school at the time. And I was really detached with religion at that point. So I was like, but it was just going through because I really just wanted to keep staying with my friends. So this happened over Easter weekend. So I missed one day of school because it's like Holy Thursday, Good Friday and all that. I missed one day of school, but and was in juvie the rest of the whole weekend. Back on Monday.
How old are you at this point?
I was 17, so thank goodness it was 17. So at this point, so I get taken to juvie and I have this and in this like small room, they give you a Bible and deck of cards and you have to like mop your, really small room every morning at like 6 a.m. So like, I don't know how I'm getting dirty when I have like wool socks on, sweatpants, and like a sweatshirt that's uncomfortable and itchy. So it's like, I'm not exactly tracking dirt in here, I'm pretty much in here all day. So, and it's concrete floor. So I remember at one point I tried to like read the Bible. I was like, this isn't doing, and I had this like moment for myself after all this where I decided like, oh crap, like I'm no longer like it's the first time I really took accountability for something in my life. I was always operating from a place of I'm a victim of circumstance, like things are happening to me, I'm just like bad luck or whatever the case is. And that mentality probably contributed to depression and other things, and I didn't know that at the point, but when I had that realization, like it was sort of like this strange, like I got myself here. I'm fully responsible for everything that happened. I need to get myself out. I don't know how, but I have nothing, like no one caused this to me. I caused this to myself. This isn't like some random act of God or anything. Like I fucked up. Days later, my parents were able to get me out because they got a good attorney. And I was like on juvie, or I was in like, what do you call it? Like house arrest or probation. That was it. for like a year. At this point, I've not taken any like drugs or anything. Probably the only drugs I was dealing with was adrenaline from stealing stuff. I did get away from stealing things before. And that's where I was like, I think that was my first hint of like being alive. I was like, whoa, what is this? I'm connected to something else that I've never experienced in my life before. And that's what, and then I got a little greedy, you could say. Actually, the funny part is like, I was trying to take this game that came out called Enter the Matrix. And I don't know. And it was like a horrible Matrix like game. I thought it was fun at the time. Probably people look back and like, oh, that game was shit. But there is definitely a sense of irony that was the game that entered me into the Matrix. Like that me stealing that game, 6 copies of it, exactly 6 copies and some other CDs was like sort of like my foray into finding myself. Because after that, and after like juvie, and then I got my first job, a guy I worked with, he had a guitar he was selling, and I had a friend in high school that also was into music, and we both like started getting into like metal, listening to like Slipknot and Core, and so like a lot of new metal stuff. Went to my first concert with like, was it Slipknot, God Forbid, Chimera, and Fear Factory. Remember these things.
Nice.
But that concert connected me to this bigger thing of I felt like I mattered all of a sudden. So I went from having not existential dread to not knowing where my life is going to, connecting to adrenaline, this like a sensation in my body I was not familiar with that, man, I don't, where, I'm tapping into something new that I've never, I felt like so excited, scared, alive. It was like all the feels. And then getting connected to like being in a concert where like people are like moshing and there's like this incredible energetic exchange between like the band and the fans. And I was like, whoa, I also felt this sense of camaraderie and like this, I realized my voice does matter. And I matter. And that was really powerful and inspired me to like want to pick up an instrument. So it's interesting. This first job I got to like, I bought a guitar and started playing guitar from the guy, my fellow dishwasher, and also smoked weed and drank for my first time, So that was like my introduction. And first it was a lot of like debaucherous, use of like weed and drinking. And it's interesting is like when I look back, I'm like, I don't know how I functioned like with the amount of stuff I consumed. And eventually that, I did get to have an experience with like mushrooms, and my first mushrooms experience was interesting. It's like, I remember taking the mushrooms, and typically terping when I was younger involved watching a movie that was already weird, was that Fear and Loathing, or like trippy, like a visual on YouTube or something. I think YouTube was around then. Yeah, it's been around for a while. But I remember like when I took these mushrooms, like, feeling weird, and I was eating some food, and I remember like being able to, the sensation of like I could point to where the food was pointing down, and maybe I was making that, but it was like I could feel a sensation of something going down every time I saw it. I was like, oh. And then I went outside to go pee, and I was peeing on a tree, and the tree was making faces at me, so I made faces back, and it was like, and I thought this was so normal. I'm like, that tree was just like making faces at me, so peed a little harder. And then, and the same with acid. It was like I took some with some friends, and we were just like listening to music, and it was like very casual. There wasn't any deep, profound like thing coming from it. But I think a lot of it was because the focus was external, and it wasn't, and maybe we just didn't know, we didn't have like the tools or like the navigation to like work. We were just like, oh, this is weird and this is kind of cool, but I don't know what to do with this. It wasn't until college where my relationship with like psychedelics changed drastically. I had a roommate I met a kid. So it started with like in one of my math classes, there's a kid that like said, hey, like reach out to me after a class, like, hey dude, like I like all the bands you wear shirts of. I'm like, sweet. So like we So he also a fellow metalhead. So we like connected on that, and we ended up being roommates the next semester. And he's like one of my, favorite roommates I ever had. We got along so well. And in this friend circle that he was connected with, we started, there was like sort of, I guess I wouldn't call it a party house, but it was like a place where, it was a house where there was like some, you could say resident DJs, if you will, who like worked on music all the time. And there's always like 16 people in the house at any given time, you know, it's a lot of people's, and I remember meeting these people and getting to trip with them. And it was the way that, and now while they weren't the most responsible with how they took their psychedelics, I actually learned a lot of responsibility from, psychedelics. I learned because the way they were using it was a lot for like internal work. And and I think it was also how, like whenever you were taking something and they either were or weren't, they would ask, how are you feeling? And I remember one time I was taking, maybe it was like my first time taking MDMA, and I was like outside in the grass, and I was like feeling the grass and pulling it up, and just like I was feeling so much. And he's like, and guy asked me, he's like, how are you feeling? And I said, amazing. And he's like, awesome. Now remember this when you get out of this and bring this out. I was like, whoa. And it reminds me, I think that really made a huge difference for me that night, because it's like watching someone finish a movie or play like if you're watching the end of a video game and then you reset the game. So like psychedelics is kind of like showing you what's possible and what, at least at time, that's how I related to it. It's like you get to see what's possible and what's available. And then when you're back in like sober reality or normal reality, you get to, now it's your chance to get back to that. You got to see the last boss. Now you're like, cool, I know where I need to get to. So you don't have it all, it's not outlined for you, but you have to do the work to get there. But you have a sense of what it feels like. So then you can start like, how do you can tap into that? And then, have you ever read the book? And it's called PCAL or TCAL. PCAL and TCAL is like PIHKAL. It's like phenylphenols I have known and loved, and TCAL was tryptamines I have known and loved. And it was by a book. The author was, I think it was Alexander Shulgin. He was a gentleman who worked as a chemist, worked for Dole. And it was like the books were about his experience of like working as a chemist, doing this thing where he would bring friends over and they would take these substances, and he would just like write down like, oh, what's your experience like? And he would like basically notate it in his journal. And he would have some ways of indicating, oh, like you took this dosage and you're feeling this, you're like a +3. And then, and it was like a very interesting and what sounded like a pretty ethical and responsible way to take and explore these medicines. Cause also someone was sober to help, if anyone was really struggling. So it sounded like it was a very cool system they had. In that book, they talk about, how gosh, I lost my train of thought right there.
You're talking about keeping it with you after the journey.
Yes. Now I'm wondering why I even brought that book up in the first place, but there is something about the book, how it was, so like responsible use of like medicines. So that I learned a lot of, like, even like reading that book, which was shared amongst these friends, that helped me like connect to like, oh, like there is some like medicinal, value to this. And I think that was before I started like researching, like digging into how this was going to be used. And yeah, I lost it, but anyways, the book was fascinating. Highly recommend it for you.
Yeah.
So having the experience of like, okay, how do I, recreate this for myself? And I think I found myself, up to this point, I've been, having that experience with psychedelics. I wanted to continue to find out like what's real, like it started, and maybe that started from that whole journey with stealing and adrenaline. It's like, I didn't feel like I was living and life didn't feel meaningful. And I almost ended my life because of it. And once I got on the other side of it, it's like, I want to find out where this goes. I want to find out to what extent life is beautiful and fulfilling and maybe even scary and like dark. I kind of want to see like all the facets of it. And so I continue to like dig into more, like you say, research, either experimental or and one time I had an experience where I was on acid and this guy was talking about polyamory, and I was just the way he spoke about it that night, where it's like, and it just, maybe it was because I was on acid, or maybe I was listening and I wasn't blasting off somewhere else, but there was a combination of any of those things where it really resonated with me, where he's like, oh, like imagine, like look at love, like we treat love as this like finite resource that we have to hold. And it's kind of like, there's only so much love going on the world, Yeah. It's like love stocks have plummeted. Keep your love to yourself, And this person referred to as like, oh, like think of it like a candle. You get to light it and share that with other people. And so I mean, he certainly didn't go about time management and all the other important things but it really like rang some truth for me, because I wanted to find, so as part of like wanting to have these experiences, and even taking stuff like taking MDMA and exploring like, oh, like I feel super open, connected. How do I continue that open connectedness with other people, but also like sober,
Yeah.
And, that eventually, took me down that path of exploring love and expression. We'll get to that, we'll V-line to that.
Yeah.
But then there was a certain point where I think I started working with like more powerful medicines. Like I got to experience DMT enough where it's now, there's a certain point where the trips took, where I started noticing a very prominent energy, if you will. Like, I think it was my last time taking it before I moved out to Colorado, where I had felt this very like motherly or feminine energy. Just like every time I've taken it since that point, it's like, I feel wrapped and cared for, and just kind of like every inch of my being knows that things are going to be okay. Even if I have no freaking clue how that's going to happen. I'm just like, oh, this feels really like things are going to be good. I don't know how, like everything feels like it's falling apart, but okay. I just feel good about this. So, yeah. And eventually got to work with 5-MeO DMT with a shaman out in Ashland, Oregon. That was a trip, literally. Yeah. Where a friend and I got to go in this guy's house. He took the medicine as well. So he's also in it, but he's taken this stuff enough where he's like standing over you and like snarling. Like it's if you're watching from the side, you're like, you would think this guy was batshit insane.
Yeah.
But if you were in the experience, you're like, it didn't feel weird. Yeah. It wouldn't feel weird having this like 6 foot something, really tall man who's got this really deep voice, waving this big, like huge feather, like literally huge feather in front of you. And it's like sometimes crawling around you and snarling and trying to like energetically work out things. That didn't feel weird to me at all. But the experience that experience kind of took me, I think that was also like another like beeline into some other like exploration of life, because when we were doing these sessions, it was 3 bowls. So it's like every time you're like, okay, you're going back under. And we did this back to back for a couple of days. So it was like 3 total sessions over, 5 days or something. The first day was both of us. Then it was back, alternating. During that experience, I had no idea. My connection to myself, my identity as Fernando was non-existent. I was I just remember the scenery being not very visual. It's just like I was in blank space. I could see stars, and I was the stars, and I also was nothing. So everything and nothing at the same time. And I was like, and also existing outside of duality. And that felt really strange because all we know is like this or that. Yeah. And so when you're existing in a space where you're just like getting to watch things from a very non-biased view and just being with it, it feels cold, but that's the only way I can relate to it, because lack of emotion feels cold. And you're just, I guess we're just not used to like being like, how do we exist outside of this is what reality is as we know it.
Yeah.
And after the first 2 sessions, both my friend and I were horribly depressed. And it was a depression from intense awareness of the suffering that we cause on each other as humans and ourselves, and how little and how much that we just perpetuate these systems that cause pain, suffering, either with willingness or unwillingness. And just it's devastating. And it was really hard to be with. Like we were both, it was, the air is very heavy for both of us. And it was after the 3rd session, which I'm grateful was finally, where it felt like we snapped out of it and was like, okay, it doesn't have to be so much doom and gloom. But it's like, I got to have a more introspective look at like, what is my part in all this? And so I think that started leading me towards, and that continued me on my path. Like I ended up moving out to Colorado not long after that experience. And I kind of got to find myself. Like I think I really found myself being out here and like moving to a state I knew no one, with only everything that was in my car, and enough money for a month and a half to survive, with no job, no contacts. Like the only thing that was set in stone was like my apartment that I never even saw. I was like, I saw the pictures, paid the deposit, the landlord's like, oh, do you want to see the place? I'm like, nope, I'll see you when I move there. and then since then, it's just, I've continued to have these experiences when I work with, I notice with psychedelics where it's like, I want to sit with the intentionality of it. And sometimes it is fun. Like if I'm taking on a festival or something, I know that their space is more right for maybe connection and openness, but also like playfulness, because there needs to be some element of play in our existence. And, but then there's times where I want to take it and I want to like really work on some stuff. Like DMT has been really powerful to work with, to like, for me to internalize and be with myself, like take it with myself and be with the medicine so I can move some stuff. So, and I think it's like next month. We're in February, I'll be working with ayahuasca, and I'm very excited to like have that journey.
Yeah. Because you haven't sat before, right?
No, this will be my first time. I think I have the option of doing a couple times, so I'm going to do it every single time.
Yeah.
So I'm maybe a little nervous. I'm like, I haven't done this before, but yeah, I'm open to meeting the mother if you
yeah. Yeah, I wanted to ask, you were talking about that reoccurring dream coming into when you were 18. Was 18 the first time you did mushrooms then? Or what do you feel like psychedelics played into that time of your reoccurring dream, or that timeline?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think I took mushrooms at 18. Although now I'm like curious. I think it was it was within a certain period, but the dream stopped happening after I had the experience of like taking acknowledgement for my life and like getting out of juvie. And so it seems more like, so it wasn't so much the psychedelic, and it's hard to tell because now it's been so long, but it seemed more like when I had like a shift in my own perspective of life, when I wanted to actually, I wanted to be in it rather than like escape it. And I think up to that point, I just didn't know how to relate to it. I was willing to end it because it just didn't feel like it mattered. And then now I get to see, have a very different view of that now.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's interesting how much I can relate to you in that, both in the fact that I got caught stealing when I was 17.
Oh, yeah, do tell.
And it was a very interesting moment because I was working at a grocery store and stealing from the grocery store.
Classic.
Yeah. And so my manager caught me, and he was like walking me into the back, and he asked for my dad's phone number. And then he was like, "You're not 18 yet, right?" And I'm like, "No, I'm not 18. He's like, "Okay, if you were 18, I'd be calling the cops." And it was like 2.5 months to my 18th birthday. I was like, "Oh, I can't do that anymore." like this is over. And, I got into stealing just from like my friends were doing it, and I saw how easy it was. I was like,
everybody's doing it.
You just put it under your shirt and walked out? Like, what the hell? So I think I had a very similar of like, it was kind of a rush, and it kind of like gave me this like jolt of, I think it's almost like it feels like some sort of control in your life of like you're doing something where it's like all on you, and you like have to have problem solving and and then you accomplish something by getting away with it.
Yeah.
So it's almost like these little like missions, but not exactly the most humanitarian way of going about it. And it was interesting because like on that day I was like, okay, well, that's over. Like I definitely don't want to get in real trouble for doing, and I wasn't stealing anything good. I was stealing stupid shit. I was stealing like makeup for my girlfriend and like booze for my friends, and just like, oh, what am I doing? But like from there, when I was 18 was the first time I did mushrooms. And I'd been on Western medicine since I was like 13, taking all sorts of antidepressants like imipramine and Zoloft and Paxil and Wellbutrin and all these fucking pills. Like, and they just keep switching me and switching me and switching me. And, I never felt good on any of them. There was one that I took for the longest, and it just kind of like helped me actually fall asleep at night. But I didn't feel like I slept. It was like, all right, back to it. Like it wasn't restful sleep, but just kind of was this like single vibration forever. And my friend had gotten me into the work of Carlos Castaneda when I was really young. I don't know if you know him. So he was an anthropologist in the 50s who worked with a Yaqui Indian shaman named Juan Mateus. And he wrote these books that became very popular. He's got drama around him as his career continued to grow, as everyone does. But my friend got me into these books when I was very young, like 14, 15 years old. And it's all about them smoking these hallucinogenic mushroom powders that he creates and doing all this shaman work. And so my approach to psychedelics, like I was very much a prude growing up. I didn't drink and I didn't smoke. I didn't do cigarettes. I smoked weed once when I was 16. And surprisingly, I was like, I want to try everything when I'm high. So I'm just I'm not going to get into this right now. Yeah. But so my friends, like I told them that I had mushrooms, and everybody was like, oh man, well, like, just make sure, like, call one of us, like, do it with one of us, like, do it during the day and just don't eat too much. And so, I ate it alone at night and just ate a bunch. Yeah. Because I was like, well, you kids don't know what the hell you're talking about. None of my friends had done mushrooms before. So they were just, doing the cautious route. which isn't a bad thing. But I was approaching it from this kind of researched mentality of reading Carlos Castaneda's books. And one thing I had said to my friend when I was younger was, I don't want to drink and get drunk. I don't want to smoke and get high. I want to eat mushrooms and learn something about myself. So that was like how I was approaching it. I was like, okay, like I'm sober all the time because I want to be in control of my life. So this is like a conscious decision to like give myself to the mushroom. And if you've never tripped before, a lot of this is going to sound wild because you kind of create a relationship with these things. And something that I believe that normal society doesn't open themselves up to is kind of how crazy this life really is. Like we try to box it all in, and it works for the narrative of just sticking together, creating cities, all this kind of stuff that we've got going. But the thing about life is none of us know what we're doing here. None of us know where we came from. We've got guesses, and everybody thinks their guess is right. And there's a certain amount of comfort in that because then you can go, all right, well, I know what's going on. And through all my psychedelic experiences, I've only grown more questions. That's all I've gotten from it. And that's where I've decided to live is like, oh, I just really don't have any idea. So I got to stop trying to preach to other people what the truth is. Like when I first did psychedelics, I was like, you guys got to try this. Like I couldn't shut up about mushrooms. Everybody I talked to, I'm like, have you ever tried mushrooms? But it's because it's such a powerful experience, especially when you really dive in and do a good dose. People, again, in the avenue of people not understanding the relationship you create is like, people think that getting drunk is normal and that getting high is weird and tripping is really weird. And it's like, I've been really high before on cannabis and never at any point did I forget what my body had been doing for a long stretch of time. Never when I've been tripping have I done things that I look back and go, why did I do that? What the hell was I thinking? I've done that on booze. I know so many people who have done that on booze. The fact that your body continues to go without your conscious state being there, that's one of the craziest fucking things a drug can do to you. And that's what is perceived as normal. And I'm glad to see the narrative changing of people opening up to the fact that there is this blanket statement that drugs are bad. First of all, has never truly been a blanket statement because we have all sorts of drugs that we use every day that we just don't lump into the same category as psychedelics or drugs that I consider harder, such as like cocaine, methamphetamines, heroin. And we have to start differentiating these things, that there is differences to the experience of these substances. And we need truth and honesty around them. We need to stop living from this fear-based place. And because it's like treating us like children, which I don't think is a good way to teach children anyways, to be like, well, if that happens, the boogeyman's going to rip your fingers off. Eat your damn peas. It's like, dude, that's the best approach. That's what you came. And it's like, that's what we've allowed people to do to us as adults. Like if you do that, you're going to burn in hell for all eternity. If you do that, you're going to go to jail, which is a crazy thing to do to people. The fact that there's people in jail right now for cannabis related crimes is nonsense.
Great.
And I'm very grateful to see the wave changing, because I took that first dose of mushrooms when I was 18. I still have the journal that I was writing in at that time. And after that experience, I didn't take another pill. I got off of Western medicine. I stopped and I lived a better life just from one experience. It gave me, like what you were saying, it gives you a wider perspective. It gives you kind of this elevated source of seeing how life could be. Gives you just kind of this new perspective on it. And from that, I was able to kind of soften myself, soften into the experience of life. Like from my journeys with mushrooms, I've opened up so much to the fact of how much of a gift life is. Like there's so much tragedy in the world and there's so much suffering. And for a long time, I really had trouble with that as well, of like, why is all of that going on? And there's no answer why, other than it's there to kind of show the people that aren't suffering that like that's a possibility in this reality. Do you want to be a part of the suffering? Do you want to be someone who curates suffering? Or do you want to be the part of this experience that makes it better for people? And like, I always wanted to save the world. Like, I really thought I was the guy. Like, I was born on Christmas.
Like, step over Jesus.
Get out of the way, man. I got it. I'm come back. But it was like, it started to get overwhelming as I learned more and more about the problems with this world. And that's what sent me into depression at first when I was a younger man. I grew up in a very nice neighborhood, and then suddenly I'm on the internet seeing how horrible the world is, all the tragedies that we put on each other. And getting to a place where I went through being overwhelmed with that, and then bringing it back into myself of like, look at what you have control of. Like you're this body right now, you're Jordan. So control that, and control that in every moment of your day. Like the things that I can change and affect are the things that are in my sensory area. If I can hear it, if I can see it, it is now a part of my life. Like people wonder when they should get involved with things. It's like not every situation needs you to be involved. But like if you see an old woman drop something, you saw it. It's a part of your reality. You can run over and help her pick it up. You can help the person that's struggling in every moment that you see it. And it's, you know, it's definitely a nuanced thing, as everything in life is. But it allowed me to take more responsibility even for my choices of like, oh, I don't want to just steal things, and I don't want to like allow my emotions to take over me to say horrible things to people. Like they're there. My mind is always giving me the ammunition, but it's still my choice to load the gun and fire. And I feel like psychedelics for me have given me a lot more compassion for other beings in my life, and noticing that like none of us have a grip on what the hell is going on here. Like none of us really know. And coming from that place, I was able to level the playing field of like, oh, we're all in this together. And we can either fight about it or we can make this awesome.
Yeah, there's so much. I really appreciate when you mentioned that we know so little about our experience, and that makes me think of like, yeah, we do. It does feel like we go around and act like, well, first off, I can relate to like the softening and connecting more to people, and because like I think before, it's easy for us to get caught up in like knowing things and then the world of experts. And so then we kind of, throw up our power and say, the experts got this. I don't have to do shit about this. And that doesn't feel like a very empowering way to approach life. It also it feels weird to say like any one person has all the knowledge about this one thing, and then they're the disseminators of that information. And that doesn't, because anytime that we do have information we share out, it's always going to there's going to be like filters we're working through, experiences, maybe judgments, prejudices, or there may be assumptions, in how we interact with people. So you may get the information, but it may be through a filter of like, I know more than you. But then I wonder, like sometimes I wonder why like some of these drugs or psychedelics were scheduled, which I agree, it's horseshit.
Yeah.
Because when used responsibly, and I think there's definitely an irresponsible way to watch people like just, they're stuck in taking these things so much. It's like it's like almost like an addiction to the feeling, or like being in the escapism of it. And that occurs to me as like irresponsible, because then you're not working with the tool to actually get somewhere. That's why I talked about the books. There is a chapter where they, I think they refer to a quote, and it's like and I forget who said it, but when you hear when you get the message, hang up the phone. And and it was about a chapter where one of the ladies in the book talked about taking a trip, and she talked about this door that kept showing up, and she knew that she could go through the door, but she would never come back. And I don't know if it was like, and I'm curious if other people have that tripping experience where they see this like door and it's like an outline of something, but they know that their life ends going through it. So I don't know how that works and what, if there's any other lore around it, but I think that was the chapter where they talk about when you get the message, hang up. And I think that was a big call for responsibly using this medicine. Like, don't just keep tripping because it feels good. It's like, if there's a message you got, you're like, got it. Thank you. Because if you stay on the phone, that's when, I feel like that's when the trip isn't as enjoyable. And there's probably other stuff that you got to face, because it's like you're stuck. You're no longer trying to actually work with the medicine, like creating a relationship to understand yourself and understand others. Now you're just like connected to this feeling, and in a sense you're disrespecting the medicine. And it's not, I would imagine that there's going to be some repercussions for that. But I guess going back to what we were just talking about with being not knowing, I found in taking these things, I found such a great comfort. I'm like, this life is so fucked. I know so little, and I'm okay with it. It was just like this beautiful, and that's like the beautiful thing comes. It's just like, and we all try to put on our best suits and ties, and we try to like act so pompous and like we've got our fucking shit together. And it's like, no, we're all like fumbling around and figuring it out. Like, have you seen how our government works? They don't, they barely have, like, have you seen how the DMV works? Like, you really think these guys are like, this is the best we got. Okay. Yeah. We don't, I think we have a fear of like not knowing things. And I think we have to like really lean into like it's okay to not know, because if you say, it's hard to learn. Learning is not possible when you're saying, I've got this, to the degree where I don't want to hear your advice. I've got this. When you say, I don't know, and I'm curious, and you explore that curiosity, there's like room for learning across the board, because then you're not shutting yourself out. Have you heard the saying? It's like, when you wear the black belt, be willing to wear the white belt once in a while. Like, you may think that you know so much, but like, be willing to take that belt off, put the white belt on, and be like, have the beginner mindset again. And I think trip and psychedelics and those experiences help us get into, if not just like a childlike state of wonder. And I think also like setting and people around have a huge influence, because not all the time is it like playful, but
Yeah.
but in a great context, you can have a very like a playfulness, a curiosity. And it's not about what you know and don't know when you're tripping. It's all over it's more about the fascination of like the experience and maybe what you find out about yourself. And I don't know, this may be an unpopular opinion, but I'm of the impression that the notion of bad trips is coming from a place of, I don't want to look at this. And I think the resistance creates that bad trip, experience where now you're essentially, anytime you meet life with resistance, there's going to be pain. There's going to be suffering. And so I don't know, can you relate to this experience of like having a bad trip, or do you just see it as like part of like, for me, it's like, I look at it as just, these are all just valuable lessons for me. And no matter how intense it is, it's for me to face. And like, even it's like, oh, I fucking do this thing. I do this to people. That sucks. I do not want to do this because I want to show people respect, or I don't ever want to do that to others. And like, that gives me like a really intense like mirror right here. And it's like, I get to be with my mistakes and the things that I may not, I may be quick to like look at others and be like, oh, do this too. So then it's like, what do I do with this? I do something different. So I don't, I'm curious what your experience is with how you relate to the trips as, bad trip, good trip.
Yeah. I would, I'd definitely say that I've only had one experience I would consider a bad trip. And the only reason I do is because I couldn't have linear thought. And it felt like I was crazy because I was like so all over the place. And I don't know what caused it. It's only happened one time. And, I came out of it just like, well, that was very uncomfortable, but it was still beneficial because I was like, oh, that's what it feels like to be crazy. Like you just can't grab onto anything. And it made me like happy that I could grab onto shit, So like, I definitely agree that I feel like most of the fear around bad trips is that you're going to see something that you don't like. And it was wild that I had a dream when I was younger where I was running through a maze, and I turned a corner in the maze and there was this long hallway and there was a person standing at the other end. And I was like, who is that? And like, they were like, like right in my face. And it was me when I was older. I was like 12 maybe when I had this dream. And this older version of me leaned into my face and just went, you're going to die when you're 25. And I was like, just nodded in the dream. And then I opened my eyes in bed and it was like I'd been awake for hours. It was like I just closed my eyes and opened them. And I was like, whoa, that was crazy. And so I kind of, that dream came up a lot when I was growing up. And then when I was 25, I smoked DMT for the first time.
There it is.
Yeah. And it was a, super powerful experience.
Yeah. I was like, there's a layer.
Yeah. And so coming around to this experience, like I called my mom the next day. I smoked it 3 times that night because I did it and I came down and I was like, what the fuck was that? And then I did it again because my mind was already like, we got to fit this in our box of understanding. I'm like, there's no way, man. There's no way to bring that back down to just like conscious understanding. So I went again just to remind myself because my brain was already trying to just be like, no way, man, we can't hold on to this. And went back, had a very similar experience, came back down and then was like, okay, I want to do it again to like play with it a little and see like, okay, now how can I dance in there? But from this experience, I told my mom the next day about it. I called her. I'm like, hey, I'm going to have to vomit information at you. I had this experience. I just have to talk to somebody about it. And I talked about it to her for like an hour, and I was like, I just feel like I've been born again. Like, I feel like everything has changed, and like I died and I'm born again. And she said, do you think that this is what that dream was about that you had when you were younger? And I was like, I didn't even know I told you about that dream. But she relayed back to it. And from that experience, to bring it back around to like good trips, bad trips, I felt like in that experience, like growing up, I felt like there was this door in my mind, and behind that door was hell. Like behind this door was all the darkness. And I felt like I was going to get into a fight with someone, and that door was going to just blow open, and I was going to black out and really hurt somebody. Like I just thought it was waiting, like this animal waiting to get out and attack. And during that DMT experience, I felt like I grabbed the handle and opened it. And the only thing standing on the other side of it was me. And I was just like, holy shit. And it was like I had gotten to the bottom of the rabbit hole, and the only thing that existed there was me. So it's like that was what I was afraid of truly living my own life and truly living this experience as an individual. And I feel like these experiences of oneness that people have when they're on psychedelics, like I think it's this reminder that before and after individuality is everything. You know, you're connected to everything. And the experience of being an individual is this exploration in what it feels like to be disconnected. And given choice, in a sense of like, all right, what do you do with this? Here's like, and it's like a game in the sense that you have certain rules. You know, if you jump off a cliff, game over. Like you're allowed to drink yourself to death. Is it a good idea? Not for my journey. Like I would much rather stick around. And so I feel like in good trips, in bad trips, from my experience, like not having many bad trips, but also I've always approached psychedelics from a little bit more of a mature standpoint. I don't know what word to use there, but responsible, I guess. Like I never approached tripping with a party mindset. Like I just read too much Carlos Castaneda. I'm like, oh, you're supposed to be in the woods alone with the experience. So I've heard from people who have had bad trips, and they always say at the end though, like it still helped me. Like, man, I'd never do that substance again. You know, it was so dark and crazy, but I learned a lot about myself. And it's like, I feel like, again, that's the fear that people have, is that there's something that they're not looking at. I almost feel like the fear that comes up when you promote psychedelics to people, if it isn't a fear of programming, of like, LSD is going to make you fucking crazy. Yeah. You'll never be the same again. Like outside of those fears, there's almost the fear of the ego. Like the ego is like, no, we can't do that. We cannot do mushrooms. Like we'll die. We'll die. And it's like, no, you're going to die. Like your ego, this thing that tries to control you, that tries to push you in a certain direction that isn't in alignment with yourself. Like that's what's afraid of the journey, is that you're going to really learn something about yourself. And sometimes you're going to learn that you've been kind of a shitty person. Yeah. So I think that, I mean, I definitely want to caveat all this with like do substances responsibly. Like there is set and setting. And that's why I promote like just more forthright knowledge being put out and not fear propaganda of like, there are responsible ways to approach these things, these mushrooms, these LSD, all of these types of psychedelics, all types of substances, like caffeine can fucking kill you. So we drink it in coffee in microdose amounts. Like all of these things, life needs to be approached with responsibility. And I feel like that's where I've come to with psychedelics, is that it's just taught me that, listen, this is finite. I know you like being Jordan. A lot of the time you haven't, but you've at least come to a place where you do. This isn't going to be forever. And it's your choice how this journey is going to look. And I think that is another thing that people don't like to take on, is control. They think they want it, but it's a very fearful thing, because then the mistakes of life are on your shoulders. Mm-hmm. And it is your responsibility not only to try not to make mistakes, but then course correct once you have.
Yeah. When you mentioned, I'm going to circle back a bit and come back to this, but about when you mentioned your trip experience, like, oh yeah, I did have, we call it trips or trips. So but I did have a trip where I thought we were taking mescaline, and I felt insane. My friend and I took it, and we were in her apartment. And when we took it, we were stuck in loops. And like there would be times where like I was like eating out of the fridge, like yogurt or something. And I'd forget what I was doing. I'm like, why am I holding this? And I would continue doing the thing. And it'd be like 30 minutes of me doing this. I'm like forgetting and coming back to it, forgetting and coming back. And then and sometimes we would like walk in circles in the apartment. And it was like after the experience, I think it was something else, and it definitely was not mescaline. I was like, well, that was probably one of the only trips where I was like, well, all I did get to experience was like humanity, being a human is crazy, and maybe this is what it's like to be a crazy person. Yeah. And I'm grateful that I have some semblance of my life in some order. Yeah. But I think going back to like the responsible use of these medicines is that when we take these things, we're this kind of, you're talking about opening the door and what's on the other side is like, it's, you heard the Carl Jung quote, like for a tree to grow its roots or its branches of the heavens, its roots have to go down to hell. And I think, and if I'm not mistaken, it could be related to like the shadow self. And a lot of people, they may look at the shadow self as this darker part, it's like, think of every basement you've been into when you were a kid. What's there? Everyone's like, it's dusty. It's organized. It's dark. No one looks at those boxes for fucking no matter how much someone convinces you they need it, they never look at it. And that's kind of how we treat our shadow self. We just like shove it in a box in the darkest corner and never look at it. And when we take psychedelics, I think that's where we face that. We start looking through these boxes. We get light. We fix the lights in the basement, clean it out, and then we open the boxes and find out like what have we been hiding or repressing or not expressing, or maybe expressing in unproductive ways towards other people. And being able to like responsibly use these medicines, you can like, it doesn't have to be this chaotic thing where you go and like take an axe to these boxes or like burn the basement down. It's not going to work or, be very well because it's part of your house. Yeah. But if you go in like responsibly, then you can have, you can be calm, you're safe. You can have extra lights in the room. You can open the boxes and kind of sift through and, what isn't working for you anymore. What's like being present, like, oh, I do this thing. It doesn't have to have this huge significance. Like I'm an asshole. I'm a horrible person. How could I do this? It's more like, okay, I do this. This is, and then it's like you said, it's opportunity for you to like do something different, take the path. And by the lack of responsibility of taking it, then it's not like, I'm trying to think how you relate to it, but it's not like we actually get to sift through and integrate this stuff. It seems like we're just, we were going towards the boxes, and then we started like getting distracted because of like the decorations in the basement. And then we started decorating. So it's like we get distracted by doing all this other stuff and not actually handling our shit.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, being and I guess like for hopefully people are responsibly doing these things, but if they don't, like have a friend, ask a friend, you know, and take things, you know, like take a normal dose, but don't like mix things like alcohol and psychedelics. Like just like one experience. I find weed is really grounding for me whenever I'm tripping, but and also just like be like have art stuff or like music. Don't have your screen next to you. Just like I find that I enjoy nature is like the best way to experience it. Yeah. You have to be in a more enclosed space because it's very cold. Like still go outside, like go out, bundle up and go hug trees for several hours. Yeah. I've done that before. Yeah. Like 3 hours in the middle of cold and like talking to and hugging trees. And let me tell you, they really appreciate it because like no one else is going out there and hugging them and talking to them. They're like, finally someone knows that conversation. I've been talking to all these other freaking trees. They say the same things. So, yeah, I definitely think that's a, yeah. And I wonder like, what would my life be without having these experiences? And it's bizarre to think because like, I feel like I found a lot of my own expression and relatedness to people through that. I can get out of all this cultural programming or societal programming of like how we interact with people. And we're taught to like fear people and we, you know, othering people. And then when you take psychedelics, especially with other people or in festivals and that sort of thing, that wall thins really quick. And you stop seeing people as you're not a bad person. You are a person. You start seeing people as people. And that experience makes it so that you can not only just like open your heart to like authentic connection, but also it's like a reminder that we're like you said, we're in this together. We're all having this quirky life experience that makes no sense. And we're trying to act like we know what we're doing and then making others wrong when they don't know what they're doing. But we have no fucking clue. Like, we think we have more clue than they do, and we sure as shit don't. So it's a lot of like finger pointing and assumptions, and it gets real messy. And some people go as far as like ending other people's lives because of it, because they are either afraid of the other person's expression or don't. They're either unwilling to understand it or don't want to understand it, and that it saddens me that's how disconnected we are from each other, that we are willing to end another person's life because we're so unwilling to have that connection or even see that relatedness with each other. And so is psychedelics for everyone? I think that's a there's no fair blank statement. I think it's in responsible use. I think probably a lot of people can benefit. However, there may be people who maybe there's certain psychedelics are not worth taking. I personally do not think the 2Cs are my ones I'll ever take again. Yeah. I guess that is with research chemicals. I don't know. Yeah, it's like 2CB, 2CA. Those are what designer drugs they call them. It's like all synthetic. Yeah, I just every like 2CI, 2CE, 2CB are the ones I've taken, and I think generally I've felt they're hard to dance on. So that's a huge like, no. Yeah. Secondly, I tend to feel like I have like a beach ball in my stomach. And so like even moving, it's just like, I just feel so disconnected from my body. And it's like I feel like my thoughts are more sporadic and just like make less sense. Although I did have a really cool interaction with a cat once on a 2C. I was at a friend's house and everyone I've never tricked these people before, so that was like really interesting. Yeah, and everyone's taking 2CB, and like I was sitting next to someone and they were like crawling in the bed, and all of a sudden they're like, "Get away from me!" Like, okay, all right. So it was the energy in the room with the whole place was weird. So I was like, I can just go by myself because everyone else is like I'm feeling way too much. So they have this like really small kitten. And then I walk, and the kitten just like walking up, and then just like looks down and then looks up at me. And then all of a sudden, and I didn't hear the cat make any sounds, but I heard in my voice, yo, check this shit out. And then we lock eyes. And then all of a sudden, like while we're locking eyes, it's like, if you ever watched Dragon Ball Z, like Goku going Super Saiyan. So like the energy waves. So that cat's hair started like lighting up, like the energy. And then everything darkens around me. So it's just me and the cat locking eyes. And I'm just seeing this energy around the cat. And then I see like almost like a galaxy kind of swirling behind it. And I felt like I was getting taken through this like universal like trip or something. And then that was like 5 minutes the cat and I are staring at each other. And it's just like intensifying with like the waving. And all of a sudden it just like walked away. Like nothing happened. I'm like, what the fuck is that? But the cat would just like stopped, turned up, did this. We had this like moment, this 5 minutes of like staring at each other without breaking lock, and then just like turned up and just walked away. I was like, I don't know what I experienced. It was a cool experience.
Yeah, I haven't explored the synthetics much. I mean, I recommend it. Yeah, having like gotten most of my knowledge up front from like Carlos Castaneda's work, like really kept me more on one side of it. So it's been like mushrooms, LSD, DMT, ayahuasca. Mm-hmm. And I've explored some other things to like varying degrees of success, but those are the ones that I've done multiple times and like really benefited from. And yeah, I mean, I don't think psychedelics are for everybody. I did for a long time, but it's because of how much of an impact they had on my life. Just like people who start working out, they're like, have you ever done CrossFit? Do CrossFit. Everybody should do CrossFit. It's like anything that benefits your life, you feel like is going to benefit others. And, you know, through time and understanding, it's, you know, that's also the gift of this life is everyone's different. And when you open up to that, then you get to see the beauty in differences instead of hating them, you know, and again, you have the choice to. And so, yeah, I don't think psychedelics are for everyone at this point in my life, but I do think they are a more than worthwhile thing to explore.
Absolutely.
I think that they, you know, look up groups like MAPS, Multidisciplinary Association of Psychedelic Studies. You know, look what they're doing. Look what John Hopkins, I don't know, John Hopkins. That one. That guy. You know, look up their research, get into listening to Terrence McKenna. Nobody's 100% right on this stuff. Listen to Alan Watts, you know, like there are people who have had a lot of experience with these substances and come out the other side all right, you know. Got a job, I've got friends, I've got family, I make it to work on time, like I pay my rent, I pay my bills, you know. And like the thing about psychedelics is like I don't eat mushrooms and then go, oh man, I gotta eat mushrooms again. I go, holy shit, all right, I need a couple months.
Right? Yeah.
Like it's kind of built into them. And that's again where there's a difference between psychedelics and other substances. So I'd really like to see just more honesty around these things and for fear propaganda to break down around them. And 100% stop fucking throwing people in cells because they have these substances. I'm super happy to see Denver decriminalize mushrooms, to see the widespread marijuana legalization, because people have been so programmed against these things. I didn't start smoking weed really until I was 25. And the amount of insight I got into myself and my relationships and how I communicate in my relationships, again, using it as a tool. Me and my girlfriend at the time would get into an argument and our energy would start ramping up and the fight would get bigger. And I'd be like, wait, hold on. Let's smoke some weed. And we'd smoke and we'd sit down and we'd both come back into the talk from a place of where we were wrong in it. And we got self-introspective.
Awesome.
And it's like, man, wait, this is from smoking a flower. A fucking flower. And there's all these things of like all these fucking pills that they push on us that have so many crazy side effects that aren't long-term researched. All of this shit is new and we're giving it to children, not knowing what it's going to do to us. And it's like, I'm not telling you that kids should smoke weed, but I think that kids should definitely, I mean, it benefited me a lot to be sober as a kid, because then I went into parties sober and I went into life with a more sober outlook so I can be in social settings sober and still be comfortable. Whereas so many people approached it getting drunk. And now they're like, well, I don't know how to be at a party without a drink in my hand. And it's like, I think there's a shit ton of benefit to being sober. And that's why I do it a lot. Like I haven't smoked weed in 4 months right now. And I'm probably not going to smoke for another year just to clean out completely. And psychedelics do that to you. They don't allow you to come back in. You know, I had a friend who, again, it's weird stuff, but DMT told him to stop smoking cigarettes. And he smoked it again. And literally, it was like the doorway was there. And then a guy just stepped in front of it and was like, you can't come in here, man. You're still smoking cigarettes. What did we tell you? And this was like months after he got the message. And he was like, oh, shit. Like, really? I can't come in? And they're like, no. We told you what you have to do, kid. Go do it. You fucked us. And it's like this type of stuff needs to be allowed back into the human psyche, into the fact that this is real. You know, it's a quote from Terence McKenna that I love, where he says, you know, if UFOs landed on the front lawn of the White House tomorrow, it would still not change that the strangest thing in the universe is the DMT flash. He's like aliens on the front lawn of the White House is simply mundane to this thing that is here. It's real. It's 3 tokes away. And I love that so much because it's like, listen, mushrooms are here. Stop pretending they're not. Stop pretending that there's something that they aren't. Like, just let's stop pretending that we know what the hell is going on here. Get back to a more curious mind, like you're saying, which I love. If you live in curiosity, if you live in question, if you live without this idea that you have the answer, you stay in a childlike wonderment of this world. And it's a lot more exciting because now you get to really look around you in every moment and be like, oh, this is a brand new moment. And if we are able to get more people curious, like that's what I want more than anything out of my friends and family is like, just stay curious. Stay curious about what this life is. Like, how does it feel to be the age you are now? You know, how does it feel to be where you are at in life after learning from so many mistakes and failures and successes? And psychedelics to me for my journey have been bookmarks in my life of these moments where things have shifted, these moments where who I was before that experience isn't who I am afterwards. And it's not in this thing of like, oh, I'm not me anymore, but it's me with upgraded software. I'm running a new operating system. And so far in my journey, it's been very beneficial.
Yeah. This kind of beckons the question that when you're talking about, you know, calling for like more like transparency around it. I was thinking like, what are the reasons why psychedelics have had such a bad rap to them? And I thought about it because like, I won't go into super long tangent, but I tried to go into the military and failed twice because I was basically told to lie. And that was fucked up. And that felt bad. Like that I was told to lie. And then the recruiting officer for like, what's the word when they redid my paperwork but they fucked up the questions, which is the first part. And they basically changed a lot of my answers. There's a specific question they ask you about drug use and a lot of like contradicting questions. You have to make sure you're paying attention. And so when I was trying to be honest, I was like, okay, at this time I've done quite a bit. So I'm like, I've done marijuana like 300 times. I'm like, trying to, I wasn't counting, but I'm just like, trying to, give a little bit. It's like, it was definitely a lot more, but, and like, what is it like one toke is is it like each day that you've done it? I don't know. It was very vague. I don't like go into details. And then, my recruiter basically told me, he's like, pick a number between 1 and 9. And I'm like, 6. He's like, don't you fucking forget that number. I was like, okay. Do you want me to redo my paperwork? He's like, no, like, I'll take care of it. Well, he fucked it up. And, I'm glad it didn't work out either time, but it was basically like, I was told to lie about the paperwork and they forged my paperwork. And so and I wondered like, well, if I had to do lie detector tests, because they were going to get me into nuclear engineering because I tested well, like this is not going to go down well. Because I'm like, because like, I think before I did this, like, yeah, I'm about to go and work with 5-MeO DMT here pretty soon. So like, I don't know, like, yeah, how does one beat a lie? So I'm like, how do I beat a lie detector test? And so luckily didn't get that far because it was a whole bunch of like red tape and I think there was something, this didn't work out for the best reasons. But I wonder too, like, so because of the thinning of the veil between people, like maybe I suspect that one of the reasons why we have there is a strong push against psychedelics is like, would we have a military? Because like if people had more responsible use of, and we're like, hey, like, you guys want a trip tonight? Because like I can get mushrooms from the quickie store. Yeah. They got eighths for fucking like $10. Jesus, like, and so if we had people doing that, like I think I noticed like after taking, I was like, I would like my desire to harm other people. Not that I had any grand desire to harm people, but like, it's like, that's non-existent for me. Like, I don't want to I may talk of some crazy shit, but I want to like cause harm to another human being. And that wouldn't feel good. I would feel like really like torn that I would have, if I would cause like kind of suffering to another human being. And imagine people who were going to go to the military and then you hand a gun to them, like, hey, kill these people because I told you to. They'd be like, fuck this. Like, I don't think that our military industrial complex would be able to survive. And I think that's where, probably our approach to the police and how we handle crimes would drastically change. We'd be interested in like getting to the truth rather than dealing with, like making sure we can get our numbers for the month. And so, I don't know if you have any other suspect ideas, but what comes to me is like, the very fabric of the military would not exist. Like it would actually be a peaceful, it would either drastically change, not exist, or maybe be more of a peacekeeping organization. And we would actually be able to like divert, like, I don't know, however many $1 trillion away from that into like actual things we need, like running water for certain places or actual like healthcare for everyone, improved education, classes about drug use and, like instead of learning about like, butchered politics and who was this president of which year, it's like, instead let's learn about what we've done to this country and how we can repair the damage we've done to like Native Americans and to the land. And like, let's go back to like actually contributing to the place rather than, just ripping it apart and just using it for its resources.
Yeah, a return to compassion.
Yeah.
Like that seems to be what you're saying is like we've strayed so far from connecting with each other, and especially the people in power, because they're so far removed. They're so far out. We wonder like why things don't change for the lower class, and it's more than likely engineered. We don't like to think that way. I've definitely taken my conspiracy theory hat off and set it aside for a while. I went deep for a long time, but I'm like, I don't know. I really don't. I can watch as many YouTube documentaries as I want.
You're like, these look really convincing, but at the end of the day, you're like, I have more questions.
Yeah, more questions, man. Yeah, and I feel like, that is something that overall, psychedelics or not, needs to be more at the forefront of the human psyche is compassion. That's one thing the psychedelics did teach me, where I started calling everybody my brother and sister. All my friends, I'm like, what's up, brother? What's up, sister? And that came from feeling a oneness with everybody and feeling like we're all here together. I was just like, oh, you're all my brothers and sisters. Like, we are the family of humans, that this is who we are. Do we want to work together or against each other? Do we want to work with the universe or against it? Like, I'd much rather work with it.
Have you ever used the words Hails, brother? Hails, brother, fucking metal.
I have not.
Okay. Just curious.
Oh, shit. Well, I feel like we could go on about this for a long time. I am unfortunately out of time. But I think this is something we can revisit in future episodes. I think it's funny because I don't talk to people about psychedelics as much anymore. And I think it's because, now I've had 14, 15 years of life where I've had experience with psychedelics. So it's not as much of like, hey, everybody.
Have you heard of acid
before? It's awesome. But it's like, people, I guess, this conversation has definitely kind of rekindled my flame of like how much of a role they've played in my life and how important they've been to my growth. So I definitely thank you for coming on and exploring this concept openly.
Yeah.
And I definitely just appreciate you, and I am excited to do more episodes with you in the future.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for having me. This is, in talking before, I was thinking about, I've enjoyed my experiences, but now like getting really in the conversation, I was like, I was there. I was the person who was advocating for everyone to fucking trip, I was that person too. And it's also got me real present to like, wow, like I've had like my significant life changes where like the bookmarks, as you put it, so I think of like my major life changes and shifts. They pretty much coincided with trips, So it's like, and this chapter, it's like if you're writing a chapter or a book about yourself, and it's like after, all right, end of chapter 3 when I took this, and then chapter 4 like I did this whole fucking thing, derailed somewhere else, and it's funny to think about. But I wonder now. I'm curious to like ask other people their experiences because, some people have either no relation to it at all, and that fascinates me. I'm like, man. And then but I know a lot of people who have had experiences, and I've heard their stories, and some are funny, some are really intense, and it's curious to see like where, how other people relate to it, but also bring the conversation to like, not so much to push people to do it, but like connect to your curiosity. And if you have a trip, let's set up a trip date these weekend right here, and just like, and I think that's like, that should be the new type of date. It's like, we're going to set this calendar date. We're going to trip. It's fucking great. And then we'll have to stay for recovery and bring all your markers and paper.
Yeah. Recovery and integration.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Hell yeah, Fernando. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you.
To be continued.
All right. Thank you.
Cheers, brother.
Yeah.
Bye, Earthlings.
Hails, brother.
That's your camera.
Hails, brother. Hails, brother.